Good evening, guys. Bill McMillan with NDWX.com. Have a ton that we're trying to cover and trying to do so in a relatively short period of time, so not to bore you to death this evening, but wanted to touch both on the short and the long term and some of the things, at least moving forward, that are piquing our interest as we get close to wrapping up January and heading on into February. That said, we got to deal with our own issues here in the short term first. We've got a snowmaker coming in. Clouds beginning to overspread the state from the west as we record this video just after 6:15. Snow is already developing across western portions of Illinois. This will continue to advance east during the overnight, and we forecast snow to be on the state line, the western Indiana state line, probably between 11 and midnight before quickly overspreading all of central Indiana during the overnight. This is valid 2 o'clock, and snow is moving into Indianapolis at that point. It'll continue to snow during the overnight into the pre-dawn hours and come down most likely at a pretty good clip. Forecast models continue to suggest we're looking at most likely a 1 to 2 inch snowfall for central parts of the state with this particular storm system. It's going to be a quick mover. It's going to be in and out. We'll deal with steady snow, probably tapering to flurries around or just after the rush hour. Regardless, it will be a messy rush hour tomorrow morning. Plan on that now. There will be some heavier snow, we think, downstate, maybe a 2 to 4, locally a 5-inch pop across the southern third of Indiana with this particular storm system. Now, all eyes are focused on developing winter storm that's going to be a very significant storm for portions of the country. Primarily, we think, the southern and central Appalachians into the mid-Atlantic, I think, is where ground zero will be, if you will, with this particular storm system in terms of the heaviest snowfall. A lot to look at and fine-tune and kind of tweak some of the details, but the analogs that really just continue to, that we continue to fall back on, if you will, is the blizzard of '96. And I had the pleasure of living in a small town of northeast Tennessee, if I can zoom in here, Mountain City, Tennessee. I'm sure you've probably never heard of that town. A beautiful area, though, up in the mountains of East Tennessee during the blizzard of '96. It's a funny story, not to ramble here, but we actually had just moved from Auburn, Alabama into the mountains of Tennessee there during that winter. And as you can imagine from someone being in southern Alabama into the mountains of Tennessee, just having snow, on average, about 25 to 30 inches is what this particular part of the state averages every winter. Elevation is around 2,500 feet. Needless to say, though, we got spoiled that first winter with several snowstorms. The blizzard of '96, though, was the humdinger, if you will, of all of those snows. Just wanted to pull this up to show you. I'm still forecasting for a few folks down in this area, and definitely not thinking that Mountain City is going to see 2 feet of snow with this particular storm, but overall, hopefully you can get the idea of what kind of we're looking at. And on a larger scale, this is what the blizzard of '96 produced. And as you can see, the Appalachians, Mid-Atlantic were really hardest hit with that storm. But interesting to note, southern and central Indiana got into some accumulating snow here as well with that storm system. And as we move forward, we're still not ready to write the impacts off from a Indiana perspective, at least, off. I mean, it's a very fine line, I think, between snow or no, if you will, with this type of storm. It's going to be very likely that portions of central Indiana Friday are dealing with a very strong east wind, a cold day, overcast, but not a snowflake to be found, while just south of a given location may be snowing pretty heavy at times late Thursday night into the day on Friday. We've got to fine-tune things, but the suppressed idea of the GFS and the European, I'm still not sure if that's the right solution. Tend to favor, kind of have to pinch myself a little bit here, but tend to favor the NAM and the Canadian at this distance with overall setups of the past and trying to get a hold of what's happening here as we move forward. Needless to say, though, as we put the latest GFS into motion, you're going to continue to see the suppressed track with this Thursday-Friday storm system, and it takes an area of low pressure into the southern Appalachians before secondarying off the Carolina coast here, and that will become the primary storm system. The issue, I think the flaw here is that the GFS, it's very difficult to just drive a surface low through the Tennessee Valley and expect it just to hop over the mountains like this it's just so difficult with the downsloping effects here of these the Appalachian chain. Typically what you're going to see is that surface low track into the Tennessee Valley, a reflection of the low track west of the mountains, which in return will shift this band of snow further north and west ever so slightly. Not saying that we're looking at a big central Indiana and northern Indiana snow. That's not what we're saying. This would be a southern Indiana event inching into south central Indiana potentially. But given this look, it's just going to be very, very tough just to simply drive a low over the mountains, the primary to take over along the Carolina coast. This will become the primary low. There's no doubt about that. It's gonna take over, and that will be the storm that will provide the hefty and crippling snows to the mountains and in the mid-Atlantic. But I think the GFS is still struggling with the reflection of one low, the initial low, if you will, going west of the Appalachians. Time will tell. We'll see. I could be wrong. I just know from the past and living in the southern Appalachians for over a decade, you just would not see a low, harmlessly skip across the mountains before secondarying. We'll see. Perhaps who has a much better idea here, the much better solution is the Canadian. This is much more reasonable, in my opinion, to what will actually take place. Again, here we go with the initial area of low pressure tracking through the Tennessee Valley, and most likely will track west of the mountains before the primary takes over, and then you've really got a situation here where it could turn into a crippling snowstorm for the mid-Atlantic and central Appalachians. But that said, as you can see here with the Canadian solution, it throws enough moisture with the initial wave of low pressure back into southern and central Indiana. Let's breathe a little bit and let this sink in. Needless to say, we've been going on less than the ideal number of hours of sleep over the past few nights trying to nail this thing down. It seems like every system we've been dealing with this winter is a challenging one, and by the way, that's not going to let up with this kind of pattern. But just before we get too set on any storm system missing Indiana altogether to the south, let this sink in. Hopefully it's been a little bit enlightening to you and shows why we still feel there is the opportunity for some snow of importance for southern and central Indiana. Needless to say, time will tell. GFS ensembles, well, before we get to that, again, I was sharing that forecasting for some areas down here in the southern Appalachian region, some of the ski resorts and a couple of the snow removal companies, and as it stands, this is going to be a big snow for the western North Carolina mountains regardless of what takes place. Whether we get into some mixing issues or not, I'm not sure about that yet, but places like Boone, Blowing Rock, Beech Mountain, Grandfather Mountain are certainly in fair game for a storm most likely to measure with a yardstick as opposed to a ruler, if you catch my drift with that particular setup there. So we will see as we move forward. The GFS ensembles, this is something that we were showing you last night with some of the members, what we thought were beginning to pick up on that northwest trend. Today at 12Z really squashed that idea and made it look foolish. Again, I'm still not sold. Call it stubborn, but just dealing with the past events similar to this would suggest, and we still have a few members here that do throw enough moisture into southern and central Indiana to lead to an accumulating snow event. But by and large, the GFS ensembles at 12Z did trend further south. Wanted to make sure we showed you that as well. Moving forward, we've got more challenges that await. Let's take a quick look at the teleconnections here at 12Z. The AO, kind of a mushy type event signal, neutral if you will, going into late January, early February. The NAO does pop positive. That would be a bit of a milder signal briefly. That said, as we've talked about so many times in the past, you don't have to have a negative NAO for central Indiana to have snow. I just wanted to kind of stress that. Finally, the PNA remains relatively positive. Again, this is a cold signal through the end of January and to open February. Now, we do think we've got another opportunity for a winter storm threat late in the weekend, early next week. Timing remains a challenge trying to figure out things, but let's circle Sunday night through Tuesday for the potential of another winter storm threat for the Ohio Valley. The ensembles, I think, are beginning to pick up on the idea here as we see the trough deepen in the Mid-South and then lift into the Ohio Valley. Again, Tuesday, probably if I had to pinpoint one day, is the day to kind of circle, but we'll bracket Sunday night through Tuesday as it stands now. Moving forward, the MJO, this is a nightmare scenario if you're a winter fan for the eastern half of the country, that's for sure. Not ready to bite on this just yet, but we really leaned on the MJO, swinging through the colder phases to jump on the Arctic, double intrusion of Arctic air that we saw obviously this week and last week as well. And it does have to at least raise an eyebrow as we look at this swinging through phases 4, 5, and 6, going through late January and opening up February. Looking at the phases here, winter fans, maybe not the best picture to paint for you before we close things out, but as you can see, phase 4 is much warmer. 5, you get a little, actually, I'm sorry, let me get over here to put this into January, February for you. 4 is just a blowtorch type signal for the eastern portion of the United States, and it doesn't get any better moving forward through phases 5 and 6. It's going to be very interesting. Our forecast obviously thought and continues to think, despite this, that we've got a lot of winter left, particularly moving into February and really even into March. But given the latest MJO forecast, it at least has to create pause in that idea with these much warmer phases as portrayed by the latest MJO update. So needless to say, a lot going on. We'll continue to take a look at things as we move forward. Closing out, we will bring up the snow map one more time. We think a general, sorry if I can pull this back down for you, a general 1 to 2 inches throughout central Indiana, heavier totals downstate 2 to 4, maybe a pop of 5 inches here and there across southern Indiana. Guys, that will do it. I apologize for having a long video update. We'll keep you updated on Twitter at IndyWX and online at IndyWX.com as we go through this busy pattern ahead. Make it a great evening.